Hey Merfolk fans, I'm Joe. Thanks very much for joining me today. If you'd like to support my channel, please check the link above to my Patreon page. I'm here with round 3 of a competitive Modern League. I realized I didn't show you guys the deck list that I was running in this league, but it's pretty much the same mono blue list that I've been running lately, but I just wanted to show you guys quickly. It's super duper stock. I've got the whole playset of Cavern of Souls because I'm expecting more blue decks with Jace being unbanned. Currently, I only have 7 islands. The 2 legendary lands, Minamo and Oboro. Of course, the playset of Mutavault, and to round out the 20 lands, I've got 3 Wanderwine Hubs. I think that I'm going to swap one of these hubs out for an 8th island for the next league. Just a minor change, but Blood Moon is still way more prevalent than either Choke or Boil. This list was kind of a pre-reaction to the potential reaction of the meta to Jace. Like, if there's a ton of Jace, and everybody's going to start playing Choke. And if everybody starts playing Choke, we don't want to have a lot of islands. But still, 7 is a little low. I think 8's a little better. So -1 Wanderwine Hub, +1 island. Then I've got playsets of all the Merfolk that you know and love. In the flex slots, I've got 2 Spell Pierce and 2 Kira. So defense against all the spot removal in the format helps us against affinity. We can block one of their flyers with AEther Vial, especially, is a good surprise. And Spell Pierce has just been doing an amazing job. Catches the opponent off guard all the time. So that's it. Super stock Merfolk. Let me know if you have any questions about the main deck down in the comment section below. Over here in the sideboard, right now I'm running 3 Ceremonious Rejections. This is a card that hits enough of the format that we could comfortably run 4. I have certainly run 4 in the past. It hits all artifacts, all Tron decks, all Eldrazi decks. This crushes a lot of big cards for 1 mana. But we've got a lot of decks that we need to answer, and 3 seems like a good number. So not only does it help us against like big mana decks, like countering things like Ugin the Spirit Dragon and Wormcoil Engine, but it also can counter like a Cranial Plating. So it does really great work against such a huge range of decks. As far as the rest of the counter spells, right now I've got 2 Dispels. At 1 mana, it's really valuable because if we're stuck at 3 mana, we can play a 2-drop and then still hold up counter magic to stop a Cryptic Command or Kolaghan's Command, something like that. Ad Nauseum is an instant. Okay, and then we've got 3 Negates, which are nice sort of catch-all spells. I mean, it obviously can't hit creatures, but it hits everything else. The biggest thing that this hits that Dispel doesn't hit, well, it hits sorceries, of course, but the biggest thing I think is Planeswalkers. Because, again, Jace is getting more popular. Negate also can counter Scapeshift, which is a big deal. However, on top of swapping out one of these Wanderwine Hubs for another island, the only other change I'm going to make going into the next league is trading out these 3 Negates for 3 Deprives. I don't think I have any... in my collection yet. But if I put it down to 0, I can show you guys the card. So Deprive is a spell that's sometimes played in control decks in Modern. It's basically old school counter spell. You can see the text down there, just counter target spell. But it makes us pick up one of our lands. Now, the reason... Well, I saw this in a recent 5.0 list, Merfolk, Mono Blue Merfolk list, that had a lot of funky tech by the pilot M. Hayashi. He's shown up a few times, he or she, I don't know if it's a guy or a girl, has shown up a few times in the 5.0 lists and always running crazy stuff like a playset of Fairy Conclave. Maybe they'll be running a full playset of Chalices in the main deck. But in the sideboard, he had 4 Deprives. So it made me think about it for a little while. And, you know, there's the handful of counterspells that we can consider for our sideboard in Modern. We have... on the one mana side, we've got Dispel, Spell Pierce, Ceremonious Rejection, potentially Spell Snare, though that's not really a great catch-all spell for Merfolk to run in the sideboard. And then at the 2-drop spot, we have Negate, obviously, but then you've got all of these sort of situational spells like Flash Freeze, only counters red and green spells. Obviously excellent against Scapeshift, but terrible against like white-blue control, right? When we want to be able to counter Planeswalkers. So then you have Disdainful Stroke, also great against Scapeshift, one of our worst matchups. But it only hits Scapeshift and Primeval Titan. It doesn't hit their board wipes, whereas Negate can counter the board wipes, can counter Scapeshift, but does nothing against Primeval Titan. Deprive, on the other hand, sorry, I should finish talking about Disdainful Stroke. Disdainful Stroke can't counter any low drops, right? So if we bring it in against Tron, we can't hit an Oblivion Stone, right? Which is obviously a really important thing to be able to counterspell. Deprive, on the other hand, hits any spell at the cost of picking up a land. Now, this is particularly decent in a deck that runs AEther Vial because often we don't need all of our lands on the battlefield. Now, I'm not going to go ahead and say that it's not a drawback at all because it is a huge drawback picking up a land. But we're tending to use spells like Negate, Disdainful Stroke, Flash Freeze later in the games when picking up a land is even less important. So the fact that M. Hayashi went 5-0 while running a full playset of Deprive in the sideboard makes me think that for the next league, I really want to try out Deprive in place of the 3 Negates. Late game Deprive against anything from a Primeval Titan to Jace, to anything you can think of, Stormbreath Dragon and Green Red Ponza, you can counter that with a Deprive. And that is a matchup where we bring in Negates to hit things like Blood Moon or Garruk or Monvuli Acid Moss. There's or Bonfire of the Damned. There's a lot of targets that Negate hit that now Deprive can counter while also countering their creature spells, Tireless Tracker, Courser of Crucifix, etc. All right, so that's the deck list, and those are the changes that I'll be making in the next league. Look away if you don't want to see the match results because I'm going to click in now. All right, so I'm back here now with round 3 of the Modern Competitive League, currently sitting at 2-0 after beating Red-Green Ponza and Black-Red Hollow One. I won the die roll in this round, so I would love to be on the play. And this is a picture-perfect opening hand. Go ahead and open Oboro into AEther Vial. Pass to the opponent, who also kept 7. Happened Ahab. Blackleaf Cliffs, I'm thinking Hollow One again. Faithless Looting. Oh, but Borborygmos and Grishoalbrand. So definitely not Hollow One. Definitely Goryo's Vengeance. So we don't have the best hand against such a deck right now. We're going to want to hit Spell Pierce. We're going to want to hit Harbinger to bounce a Grishoalbrand. And there's a Harbinger, so that's a start. Really, all we can do here is play a Cavern and jam a Lord, and hope that they're not, because they have the goods in the graveyard right now. If they have land, Goryo's Vengeance, Grishoalbrand, it's pretty much game over because they can just go off. At this point, they could draw 14. They could draw 21 cards after combat. Okay. So it's looked like they were tapping out for Goryo's Vengeance, but instead, Night's Whisper is great. The fact that it draws them 2 cards, whatever, but losing 2 life is not meaningless because we want to apply a clock so that when they do get Grishoalbrand onto the battlefield, they can't draw a lot of cards because Grishoalbrand requires you to pay 7 life. So we can get the opponent below 14 pretty quickly, then they'll only be able to draw 1 batch of cards. And we're going to be able to take our AEther Vial up to 2 now, which is massive to get Harbinger on the battlefield, prevent the opponent from gaining 7 life with Grishoalbrand. Mutavault is excellent. It's going to accelerate our clock. We're just going to jam this second Lord and leave up AEther Vial for Harbinger of the Tides. We'll swing in for 3, and we are almost at that sub-14 point that I was just talking about. Okay, what's he got? A Mountain, still 7 cards in hand after playing that Night's Whisper last turn. Desperate Ritual seems a little bit frightening. That'll give them 3 mana. Looks like they exiled a Simian Spirit Guide. And 5 mana means Through the Breach in this deck. And I guess that's... I mean, if they had Goryo's Vengeance, they would have just gone for that and kept their Ritual in hand, and there's Simian Spirit in hand. But let's just sort of see what happens here. The Worldspine Worm is actually really, really amazing for us because its trigger is when it dies. So it's not going to create 3/5/5 trample worm things, and it's not going to even deal any damage to us. It's not going to draw them any cards. If you're not familiar with the math, this is 10 on the board right now. Harbinger on the board is going to make it 14. It's not quite lethal. If I was the opponent and I was left at 1, I'd probably take another turn, especially with a Grishoalbrand in the graveyard. Worldspine Worm in hand is not terrible for the opponent because it means that they can draw into... what is that thing called? Nourishing Shoal, and then gain a whole bunch of life. But they scooped. Instead, I guess they were getting tired of Merfolk stuff. I don't know. But yeah, as I mentioned, we had 14 on the board. I didn't get to see if I would have hit a Lord to close it out next game. I probably would have... I don't know if I would have ticked AEther Vial up. I probably would have, just to make sure I would have gotten Kira on the board. It would have been bad if I drew a Silvergill, because then I couldn't play it with AEther Vial. But I probably would have ticked up AEther Vial to 3 for like a surprise blocker against Grishoalbrand or something. Although blocking Grishoalbrand might not even be that necessary, since I probably would have, just because the Borborygmos win condition, they need to throw lands at us, and if I'm sitting at 20 life, then they need to discard 7 lands. Well, I don't think it really makes a big difference, but I probably would have ticked up AEther Vial from 3 and 4 to go towards Master of Waves. You know what? Actually, I'm happy I'm talking through this. Leaving it on 2 would be much, much smarter. And I'll remember this in the future, now that I've talked through it with you guys. You want to leave 2 counters on AEther Vial so that if we draw future Harbingers, they can bounce any attacking crazy big creature like Grishoalbrand or Worldspine Worm. So that's like the most valuable spot to keep it at. All right, so that was game 1. Please look away if you don't want to see the match result. I'm going to click out of this window right now. All right, I am back for game 2. The opponent's going to be on the play this time. And let me go ahead and look at the sideboard here. So I have a lot of great stuff to bring in. Merfolk typically does in these kinds of combo matches. Let's check real quick how many cards I brought out. I took out all 4 Reejereys, all 4 Master of Waves, both Kiras. Just chop my curve from 4, like straight down to 2. Like literally there's no 3 drops and there's no 4 drops left in my deck. It's not necessarily like vital that I reduce my curve, but we don't often have an opportunity to even get enough lands onto the battlefield to play these guys. And of course, taking them out makes space for much, much more important cards in the matchup. So we took out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We took out 10 cards, and we brought in all the important counter magic, both Dispels, all 3 Negates, and then 2 Echoing Truths. Obviously great against anything they can throw at us, like Grishoalbrand or Worldspine Worm, and then the 2 Echoing Truths, and then 3 Relic of Progenitus. It's like the all-star of this matchup. We want to control their graveyard as much as possible. So on the one hand, you have 5 counterspells coming in, 3 Dispels, 2 Negates. 3 Negates, 2 Dispels. On the other hand, you've got 5 other cards between the 3 Graveyard Hate relics and the 2 Echoing Truths to bounce as creatures. So tons of interaction for us. We are fine being the control player in this matchup. And let's see. I'm going to go ahead and close this and look at the opening hand now. Is this a keep for you guys? I mean, we've got a Dispel. Now, Dispel hits through the breach. It also hits Goryo's Vengeance. And Dispel is an interesting card because some spells like Through the Breach and Goryo's Vengeance, right there, seems like them being instants would make them more powerful. They can cast it whenever they want. And I think, in fact, it does make them more powerful, but it does make them vulnerable to this 1-mana counterspell. So as far as this hand, for me, it's an easy keep in this matchup. Cursecatchers are one of the all-stars because if the opponent's going for Goryo's Vengeance, it just pushes it back another turn. Like, they need a Simian Spirit Guide for every Cursecatcher we have. So even if we draw garbage, right? Like, I don't even know what garbage would be here. I guess more Spreading Seas, right? We've got turn 1 Cursecatcher, turn 2 Cursecatcher, And by the beginning of our turn 3, we'll have drawn 3 cards. Like, surely there's going to be a land in the top 3 cards of our deck, right? So it's a keep for me. It's a little bit sketchy, but we're going to hit land, I think. So the opponent kept, opens up with the Scry land. Let's go ahead and just open this up and make sure we know what they're doing with their Scry. Bottom. Okay, that's what we like to see. Oh, we drew a land right away, and it's a good one. So jam a Cursecatcher here, and then next turn, if we don't draw anything good, we can play Cavern into Cursecatcher, leaving up Dispel, but it's pretty early in the game to worry about Dispel. The opponent doesn't have any gas in the graveyard yet. We might see that change. Faithless Looting has to resolve because Cursecatcher can't do anything about it. We see a World Spine Worm, but that's just going to go straight back into the opponent's graveyard. That's not a target for Goryo's Vengeance. It could be if the opponent had a Simian Spirit Guide and a Goryo's Vengeance in hand with the trigger on the stack, they could have, although World Spine Worm's not legendary, right? I don't think it is. So they can't get that with Goryo's Vengeance anyway. So, all right. So, you know, nothing dangerous in the graveyard yet. We're feeling pretty good. This keep has become amazing having drawn into that land. So we've drawn 3 out of our 4 Cursecatchers already. And as I mentioned, they are a trump card in this matchup. Now, it's still really early in the game. And so it's definitely not necessary to hold up Dispel at this point. I think playing both Cursecatcher, both counter effects stapled to a creature, is going to be the best line because it does double duty, right? It speeds up our clock and it slows down their game plan. So we'll play this Cavern, hit our second land drop, and just play out both of our Cursecatchers. So this Lord is going to turn that into 6 power if we draw another land. But at this point, I think I'll begin to sort of think about holding up Dispel. Okay, opponent's going for hardcast, Faithless Looting from the hand, adding to the one that's already in the graveyard. We should open up the graveyard just to see what they have in there. Looks like he pitched a Goryo's Vengeance. Another Scry land. Let's open up the chat again. Sure we know what's going on. And they like that one, so it goes on top. And yeah, at this point they passed, and playing out the Cursecatchers, definitely the right play because now we can start attacking. That's what we really want to be doing. Now that was an amazing draw because if I had hit like another 2-drop, for example, I probably would have just had to pass the turn after attacking for 3 because the opponent's got lands up. And I've lost to this deck enough to know that you shouldn't tap out when you have counter magic. But Relic lets us... I thought twice about playing it first main. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to wait till second main. Relic lets us use our Cavern mana while also holding up blue. So really nice top deck. Okay, hopefully these guys all connect. They did, and now we can go ahead and play out that Relic. Start chipping away at their graveyard. Looks like they got rid of like a Pact of Negation. Not cracking the Bloodstained Mire means they probably want to draw into land, which means they probably have Through the Breach in hand. So Cathartic Reunion is... I'm going to open up the chat again. In order to even cast this spell, the opponent had to discard 2 cards. So they discarded Goryo's Vengeance, and they discarded Swamp. So the discard is done. It's part of the cost. And at this point, I'm left deciding whether I want to sack Cursecatchers to counter this thing. Now, the Cursecatchers have already done damage. And assuming that he doesn't have a Simian Spirit Guide in hand, I'm going to be able to counter this with just 2 Cursecatchers. Now, there's still nothing good in the yard. And this is Ancestral Vision at this point. So, or sorry, Ancestral Recall, I think. The original, like draw 3 cards. That's all it says at this point. And we are very interested in countering that at this point. So I'm going to sack 1 Cursecatcher, see how the opponent responds. Maybe they'll just misclick and let that one work. All right, and yeah, I'm just going to sack another one. We've still got a creature on the board. We've still got a counterspell. We've still got graveyard control. And they're left on 2 cards. We've got 4 cards on our side. So I was pretty sure that was the line I was going to take. I didn't really think too long about whether it was incorrect. It just seemed perfect to me. If the opponent pitched a Simian Spirit Guide, that's just 1 less card in hand. And then I would have sacked the Cursecatcher. And with, I mean, we still want to draw a 3rd land, but having the opponent on one card with nothing in the graveyard seems pretty good. Another Cursecatcher, not as good as drawing a land, but that lets me get another creature on the board. Let's go ahead and chip away at their graveyard. It lets us play another creature while keeping up counter magic. Never let your shields down. You think, oh, I'm going to play a Silvergill Adept and draw into a land. And then you hit another Lord or something. Shields down, no mana for Relic, no mana for counter magic. The opponent plays Faithless Looting, puts Grishoalbrand, and then casts Goryo's Vengeance, and then that's pretty much the end of the game. You have to be conservative against these explosive combo decks. Okay, opponent's going for this flashback here, and I think I let him have that one. I thought about it. I did think about countering that. It's going to let them see 2 more cards off the top of their deck, potentially put a big fatty in the graveyard, but there's still no Grishoalbrand, no Borborygmos, no nothing in the graveyard. So might have been correct to let that resolve. And let's see if they have a land drop. They do, but it's tapped. So they're getting close to Through the Breach mana, but we've still got 2 Cursecatchers and a Dispel. So we've got that covered in 3 different ways. And we've got the graveyard covered with Relic. So there's that land. Now things are just going to open up for us. Easy decision just to play a Lord and just jam. We've already got answers. We don't need to draw into anything else with Silvergill Adept. So let's apply pressure. If we hit for 4 now, that puts him at 10, which means that, let's see, another Lord off the top would just have a 9 points next turn. Shockland could change that math. Now, you know what? We should always try to think things through as carefully as possible. If I had played out a Silvergill Adept and attacked him, he would have gone down to 12, and then I would have drawn a card, which is always good. Maybe another land. It would have been at 12, and I would have had 1, 1, and 2. If I played a Lord out later, then I'm attacking for 7 that turn. It goes down to 5, and then it's lethal the following turn. So the fact that I don't have a lethal attack next turn unless he plays a Shockland means it's possible I may have just wanted to go with Silvergill here. Now, I'm not even talking about Spreading Seas because he's got plenty of mana and no creatures for me to worry about having to island walk past. But I do like the potential to kill next turn if the opponent plays another Shockland. So they have a Gemstone Cavern, and looks like they're just passing here. Mutavault, that's sort of awesome. I can't cast Silvergill Adept here, so I think what I'm going to do is just play the Mutavault after activating the Relic, and just throw it on one of those black and red lands and see what we draw into. Okay, so there's that Island Walk Lord that makes it into 9 power, but still a 2-turn clock anyway. Opponent has 5 mana up, pretty clearly representing Through the Breach, but they've only got 2 cards in hand, which means Through the Breach and a scary creature to play, which means no Simian Spirit Guide to pay for Cursecatcher. So I might say you've got a Dispel in hand with mana up. Why not use that if he has something, right? But these Cursecatchers have already done a whole bunch of damage, and if they can counter a spell while leaving the other counter spell in hand, that's amazing value. I've got a Mutavault and another Cursecatcher, another Lord. Got plenty of bodies to get this guy down further, closer to 0, but so he is going for something here. Through the Breach. And presumably with this card, as I mentioned, he has to have some scary creature, otherwise why would he even play it? So I'm going to go ahead and sack Cursecatcher. I mean, if he's going to Through the Breach a Simian Spirit Guide, that's kind of weird. So he can't pay for this. And I have, let's see, if he draws another Through the Breach, I've got another Cursecatcher, still have lethal with Master and Mutavault. Let's see here. Doing something. Flashing back Faithless Looting. I can't counter that with Dispel, and I can't counter it with Cursecatcher, so I'm just going to let that go. See what happens. So there's an Emrakul. Potentially scary, but we know, let's see. All right, well, he's going for Goryo's Vengeance here, so that was a really good Faithless looting. Fortunately for us, we have tons of answers for this. Since the opponent is at 4 life, so I guess what he's going to put into play with Through the Breach was going to be Emrakul, which would have been absurd because it would have pretty much just wiped our board. I can respond any number of ways here. I can sack the Cursecatcher, I can Dispel the Goryo's Vengeance, or I can just crack the Relic and exile Emrakul. It really doesn't matter which one I do. Opponent is all wrapped up. But since I've mentioned before, anytime we can counter something with Cursecatcher, it's great value. So I'm just going to go with that line. And yeah, that was enough. If the opponent magically had a Simian Spirit Guide, of course we could have just dispelled the Goryo's Vengeance anyway, and then swung for 5 next turn. So I think this was a good example, this game, of being patient, of course, and always playing the controlling role, never letting your shields down against this deck. I didn't tap out once when I had Counter Magic and Relic to hold up. And, you eventually draw into more lands, draw more cards, and, get bodies onto the table. So I feel like this is a positive matchup for Merfolk, especially since we have so much counter magic in game 2. So let me know your guys' thoughts. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Check out my Patreon page and join me in the next video for round 4 of this Modern Competitive League, currently sitting at 3-0. So I'll see you guys there. Thanks again. Bye.